Pop Cult Pod.
Welcome to the Pop Cult Pod, broadcasting from the compound in an undisclosed location in Ireland where we're crazy for film, television, video games, and much, much more. I am your cult leader and host, Tom Pot, and I want to thank you for joining me. How are you doing? How was your week? You're looking well. Have you lost weight? Oh, you're pregnant. Oh, well, that's good news, I guess. At least it's not the other way around it. Well, all that said, now that we have the small talk out of the way, let's get on to the real talk, and that is the top 8 news stories from across the week, which we call the Kool-Aid. So without further ado, let's drink up the Kool-Aid. Starting first, we have news of Edgar Wright's next project, who has announced that he is working on a psychological thriller set in London's Soho district, and it will have a female lead. It's intending on shooting this summer with a script from Christy Wilson Cairns, whose name I probably mangled, as I tend to do on this show. She also worked on Penny Dreadful and Sam Mendes' upcoming World War I movie 1917, which I mentioned when we were talking about our awards category on our first episode. They spoke about how Soho was somewhere he spent most of his life. I think he said he spent about 25 years working around there, and that this is about the London he's existed in. He's drawing a lot of inspiration for this, of course. Mentioned Repulsion, the Roman Polanski film, and Don't Look Now, which are kind of quintessential British horror films from the 60s and 70s. The rumoured title of it is The Last Night in Soho, which that seems like quite a generic title, but that was a rumour I heard. Seems to have been confirmed at least by one source, but who knows. He also mentioned that Baby Driver 2 has a first draft. He said this to Empire magazine, and that it's going to introduce new characters and that it takes the story further, which is a very vague statement, but personally I really like Baby Driver. I don't know if it really needs a sequel. It seemed like of all the films he's made, is that the one that needs a sequel, but there you go. He's working on a psychological horror film set in London, and Baby Driver 2 is apparently going ahead. In other news, we had talk of a Resident Evil TV series which is going to Netflix. Not a lot known about this yet, but it is interesting that this was announced or rumoured about a month after James Wan's cinematic reboot had stalled or failed, or he'd stepped away from it even. All we know is that it's going to explore the Umbrella Company and the New World Order after the release of the T-virus on the population. So that could be any of the Resident Evil movies or games or anything to do with Resident Evil. So make of that what you will. Maybe it'll be more popular on Netflix. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the Mila Jovovich movies. Probably something of a new incarnation. I don't know if people are excited for this. Other news, we got Vin Diesel, who announced this week that there is a female Fast and Furious series on the way. And he did it in a rather strange way. He said, as you know, there are 3 new spin-offs that we have promised Universal. Did not know that, actually. I knew The Rock and Statham had a spin-off. Apparently there's a female one. I believe Michelle Rodriguez had put forward her dissatisfaction with female representation in these movies, so that could be a reason why. This female spin-off, he continued, we heard a pitch for the fast female protagonist-driven spin-off I created in 2017, and you could tell by the smile on Samantha's face that it was very exciting. Shout out to Nicole Perlman, Lindsay Beer, and Genevieve Robertson Dworet. Welcome to the Fast family. So, Nicole Perlman famously co-wrote the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and I believe she's also worked with Marvel, with Captain Marvel, I think. Might have to confirm that. So yeah, female-led Fast and Furious spin-off. Now, I have some questions about this. Is it just me, or is there's very few women in the Fast series? You had Gal Gadot, and she got killed off. Eva Mendes was in one of them a long time ago. I don't know if she'll come back. Jordana Brewster, she went off with Paul Walker's character. Elsa Pataki, who I think that's Chris Hemsworth's wife. She was like The Rock's henchman or something in one of the movies. Natalie Emmanuel got introduced in the last one. She was kind of a tech wizard. I think she was maybe introduced in Fast 7, actually. Yeah, there's a real shortage of women in these movies, so I don't know, does that mean they're just going to try bring everyone in, or they're going to cast a few more characters? I'm sure, of course, there will be more female characters, but it's also strange with this one, because Fast Furious franchise has really kind of pushed itself as this male kind of butch family, and we're manly. So I think it's an interesting direction to take it with a female spin-off. Let's see how that goes. I don't know how you naturally make a story out of that. How you just say, okay, we're leaving Vin Diesel and The Rock and Tyrese Gibson is that his name? That's apparently what we're at with this. I don't know what the third spin-off is going to be, but we did have a talk of Fast and Furious 9, whatever that ends up being called. I don't know actually who's going to be back in this film, because it seems like everyone's doing spin-offs and all that sort of thing, but it's going to film in London this year, is what we're hearing. And another tiny update about Hobbs and Shaw. We got a picture first of The Rock on set, and it just looked like The Rock, really, which he tends to look like in nearly all of his movies. He was just shirtless, ripped, covered in smoke and sweat and that kind of thing, and that was our picture. But we also got confirmation that WWE wrestler Roman Reigns, who's currently battling leukemia and has actually stepped away from the wrestling for a little bit, will play The Rock's brother. And there are pictures of this going on. He seems to be in a very kind of Samoan gear, so fitting with The Rock's kind of heritage. And it is an odd choice for Hobbs. Yeah, Hobbs. Yeah, Luke Hobbs, is it? Something like that. His character to be kind of this Samoan, looked almost like a tribal kind of garb they were wearing. That's our news. Roman Reigns is going to be in it. If you're a fan of wrestling, you might be a fan of Roman Reigns. Which hopefully he will. I mean, the guy's obviously battling leukemia at the moment, and he seems to be doing quite well in that battle. And I wonder if this means we could see more of him in Hollywood. But it's an interesting addition, if nothing else. Definitely seems to be in fitting with what The Rock wants for this movie. So there you go. Fast Furious is getting a female spin-off. Try to say that 5 times. Fast Furious getting a female spin-off. Why? How come I was able to say all the F's there and I wasn't able to say spin-off? That was the easy part. God's sake. And of course, Fast 9 was filming in London. Roman Reigns in Hobbs and Shaw. And there's going to be another spin-off. Loads of fast news there. Too much to keep up with. We'll know more details soon, hopefully. Another news about a reboot this time. A Jay and Silent Bob reboot. I need to explain this a bit because some people are getting very confused about this because all the headlines, people who haven't heard this said, Jay and Silent Bob reboot lands at Saban. It's a joke. The title, Jay and Silent Bob reboot, what it is that if you've seen Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, it's basically Jay and Silent Bob's lives returned into movies, and now they're trying to reboot that movie in the context of that universe. So it's still going to be Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes playing Jay and Silent Bob, trying to stop the reboot in Hollywood. That sounds, it sounds quite entertaining. We'll see how it works out. Saban is going to give out this movie domestically, and they said they're going to give it a theatrical run. It's set to begin filming in February, which Kevin Smith pointed out was about a year since his major heart attack. He's hoping to get it out in 2019. I'm guessing it's going to have to be an end-of-year release. It was something I thought was strange. I read this on Variety, I think, maybe the Hollywood Reporter, and it said that Universal Pictures Home Entertainment are putting it out internationally. Now, that doesn't really sound like it's getting a theatrical release internationally. Maybe that will change. There's certainly seen a lot of interest for this online. I think Kevin Smith needs a big hit because he hasn't had a chance to make a big film like this in a while, so hopefully it pans out for him. In other news, we have Metroid 4. It's been scrapped and been restarted, essentially. This is, I think Metroid Prime 4 is the official title of it, or maybe they're just calling it Metroid 4 now. Shinya Takahashi over at Nintendo said that the game is going to be delayed and then be restarted with Retro Studios. So Retro Studios actually made the original Metroid Prime trilogy back on the GameCube. They are returning to develop this one. Takahashi said Nintendo felt that development progress on the game had not reached the standards we seek in a sequel to the Metroid Prime series, and the studio had decided to re-examine the development structure itself and change it. I don't think, if you've been following the development of this game, that's too surprising. It is a strong move and a positive move, certainly, by Nintendo to say, this isn't up to the standard we seek. Let's start again. I think it's also, of course, good news for fans that we're getting the original studio back. It was announced in E3 2017 and hadn't been shown at the E3 after that. Wasn't shown at any of these Nintendo presentations, so not entirely surprising. Bandai Namco were originally developing it, but of course now it's gone back to its home at Retro Studio, so you're going to have a bit of a delay on this, but it's positive news if you're a fan of the Metroid series, hopefully, that it is coming and that it's going to be the guys who did the original one. So good on them. In other news, we had the fact that Warner Brothers is already working on a sequel to Detective Pikachu. Not a lot of details known about this. We had a TV spot during the week with a few more of the Pokemon designs, and they look fantastic. A lot of buzz and a lot of hype around this movie. Who would have thought that that a sequel would be made already? They obviously are very confident in this. Maybe the positive word of mouth. Maybe it's misguided. We'll have to see. But 22 Jump Street writer Oren Uziel is attached to write it. And there was a rumor that I didn't put in last week, going around that they're thinking of adapting Pokemon Blue or Red to screen. So of course that would follow battling the 8 gym leaders and getting a Squirtle or a Charizard. I wonder will that be a biting point between different, if people want to pick Charizard or Squirtle? Will that turn certain people off if they pick the wrong one? But who knows? I think that would be a hugely successful adaptation, more than the Detective Pikachu one. But if the Detective Pikachu one is a success, then I mean that one is going to be gangbusters. Then they're off and away. I mean, a whole Pokemon universe could work, and I think that's certainly what they're hoping for. So they're already working on a sequel to Detective Pikachu. And another tiny little bit of news. We have very little news here, but it's definitely worthy of mention, and that is that Warner Brothers have announced that they're going to release the next Christopher Nolan film. We know very little aside from that. They've announced that they're going to release in IMAX. Of course, Christopher Nolan loves filming in IMAX. It's set to come out July 17th, 2020. We don't have title, we don't have cast or plot details. All they've said is that it's an event film. Which, okay, sure. I mean, of course it is. Anytime Christopher Nolan puts out a film, it's a big deal. And I'm guessing the fact that it's coming out in July next year means that we're going to start hearing a lot more about this film very soon. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Our last story of the week. There's not a lot of news this week. It's kind of a bit of a lesser week for news, which is good. This episode might be a little bit shorter than the long, drawn-out ones of the last few weeks. It is the Bryan Singer story. So, settle up for this one, folks. This is an ugly story, and it's tough to know what to say about it. Let's dive into it because it absolutely needs to be discussed. It's something that needs to be brought to life to a certain degree. So, Bryan Singer, if you don't know, he directed the X-Men films, the first two X-Men films. He's kind of been in and out of the X-Men films since then. Did The Usual Suspects, Valkyrie. So, of course, he directed Bohemian Rhapsody recently, but got removed in the midst of production, with being replaced by Dexter Fletcher. When he was removed from that, his name still is on the credits because he apparently directed enough of it. Now, this isn't the first time allegations like this have come out, but during the week, The Atlantic published an article about allegations of Bryan Singer's abuse, relationships. Probably abuse is a much stronger word, certainly if you read the article, with underage boys. So this is not the first time, or the second time, or even the third time. Allegations have come forth before. I know there was an incident on the set of At Pupil back in the 90s with underage extras filming a shower scene. There was a case around the time X-Men Days of Future Past came out. But yeah, no, you should read the article at The Atlantic because it's shocking and upsetting, but definitely, in the case of these victims, their story should be heard. Now, again, I'll put my lawyer hat on. All this is alleged. Nothing has been proven. We'll see if this goes to any criminal proceedings, but it's not really the end of the story. So, first of all, not even from the... Apparently, he actually went after victims. That they alleged that in some cases the IRS was called. In another instance, immigration was called on someone. Vitriolic. And it sounds like there was even instances where people were kind of monitored by private detectives. Very upsetting, and it's something that actually is reminiscent of the allegations we heard about Harvey Weinstein as well. And in the fallout to this, Singer has said that the writer is homophobic. They've of course attacked the article, saying that originally it was going to be, I think, a Vanity Fair article, and that they decided not to publish it because it wasn't credible, and then it went to move to The Atlantic. They kind of went after the writer a little bit, Bryan Singer and his representation, that is. I don't know, there's a lot of apparently corroborating stories in this. I think there was over 50 people, that they checked with as sources for this. Yeah, and look, it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt when this is not the first time. And even looking at the pictures, some of those boys he's hanging out with are absolutely underage. So it's very, very questionable. And again, I have to be careful what I say because, in most situations, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but it's very hard when you hear some of the damning evidence. This is not a new story. Yeah, it's sad. It's very upsetting. A few things, as I said, he called it homophobic. GLAAD responded to this by removing Bohemian Rhapsody from their nominations. They took issue with his attempt to deflect the whole allegation of abuse as homophobic, which rightfully so. It's actually reminiscent of Kevin Spacey when all these allegations came out and he said, "Hey, I'm gay." It's not really the time because it's a separate issue, really. Not an issue, but saying that you're just because you're homosexual that you're being demonized. It doesn't look good for the gay community, for one. And to say that forget all the abuse allegations, I'm being attacked here because of my sexuality. It's not a thing, and you should address the allegations a bit more appropriately and directly, I think. Now, he is attached to make a Red Sonja reboot. It was, of course, from Conan the Barbarian kind of series. I'm absolutely blanking here on the name of the writer. This is being held by Millennium Films. They put out a statement which... this is one of the strangest statements I've heard. So this was put out by Avi Lerner, who was the CEO of the company, and he said, "The over 800 million Bohemian Rhapsody has grossed, making it the highest grossing drama in film history, is testament to his remarkable vision and acumen. I know the difference between agenda-driven fake news and reality, and I am very comfortable with this decision. In America, people are innocent until proven otherwise. Now, yeah, the whole innocent until proven guilty thing. Yeah, that should be followed to a certain degree. Whether or not the allegations and the actual lawsuits were handled well initially in some of these cases is questionable. But what a strange time to start saying fake news and reality. And I just thought that was a very odd statement to put out by a CEO of a company, bringing up such like political guidances like that. Then I looked into it more. So Avi Lerner, the CEO of this Millennium Films company, is also accused of sexual misconduct and harassment, and he was hit with a lawsuit in 2017. Yeah, you should read. I think it was also a attack on people's gender, like some of the women. Like if you read some of the stories about this, it's horrible. What they call some of the women. It seems like they're just, the way they're treated is completely inappropriately, to put it lightly. He also might have threatened Terry Crews's career if he didn't drop the case against that Hollywood agent who harassed him. Oh, and then there's the other fact, by the way. Red Sonja, the film they're making, Red Sonja is a victim of sexual assault. This is it's a horrible situation for a lot of reasons. Anyone who was victimized by Bryan Singer potentially, and the handling of it is upsetting. And of course, there's the whole fact that with all this going on, Bohemian Rhapsody is a Best Picture nominee now. And after more recent years of the whole Time's Up thing, and you really have to ask yourself, is anything changing? Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it is, but I hope I'm wrong. Well, on that somber note, I guess, I have a new segment that I want to start. And it's only because I feel like we get a lot of casting announcements every now and then, and I don't want that to take up the news every week because there's not really worthy of discussion. Sometimes there's not much there, and it would feel like it would really be a stretch if I was trying to fill 8 news stories and I threw in some casting. But this is a new segment, very simply calling it Cast Podcast, where we talk about casting announcements in cinema or television this week. So first up, Matt Smith, former Doctor Who, has joined Sony's Morbius, the living vampire movie. This is of course set in the Spider-Man universe. No details on who he's playing. They also set the release date for this as the 31st of July 2020. A lot of people have pegged that as a possible date for Venom, which obviously is not the case anymore. And I think it's kind of strange to put this film out in summer. I don't know. I think they're going to be very surprised at the audience for this film. It's not like Venom, where it's a character that people love and know. Morbius is a bit of a more obscure character, so hey, I could be wrong. We have, of course, Jared Leto playing Morbius. We'll have to see how that goes out, but we still don't know who Matt Smith is playing in the movies. Then we had a very interesting casting, and that is, again, about The Sopranos week. We've talked about The Sopranos now 3 weeks in a row. I swear, I watch other TV shows. It's not just The Sopranos. This is not a Sopranos podcast, not yet. And it is that Michael Gandolfini, which you might recognise the surname, son of James Gandolfini, is set to play young Tony. So he's playing the role his father would play as older, which is quite nice. I don't believe Michael Gandolfini has had any acting experience, but of course he looked the part, certainly, and you have to trust David Chase. He's made solid choices as far as actors go in the past. Michael Gandolfini is set to play the role his father would inhabit in later years, so it's good. I think Tony seems to be very pivotal to the Sopranos prequel. It's quite nice that if we can't have James Gandolfini playing Tony anymore, to have his son carry on that legacy, I think is a very powerful thing. There you have it. That's Cast Podcast, where we just run through the casting announcements. And as we do every week at the end of the news, just a few stories that aren't worthy of much discussion, are quick hits, where we take a hit and get out quick. First up, AMC, Regal and Cinemark cinemas in America will not show Roma in their Best Picture showcase. In a statement, AMC said for more than a decade, movie lovers have enjoyed the AMC Best Picture showcase to catch up on the nominated films that played at AMC throughout the prior year. This year, Academy members nominated a film that was never licensed to AMC to play in their theatres. As such, it is not included in the AMC Best Picture showcase. Now, it should be noted that AMC did not follow Netflix's rules for screening the film in theatres, and this is not the first time that AMC and Netflix have even butted heads as far as distribution and films go. Now, if only there was another way to see this film that didn't involve going to the cinema. Ron Howard is going to helm Hillbilly Elegy. Hillbilly Elegy. Over at Netflix. There was a bit of a bidding war over this, and Netflix got the rights to produce it for $45 million. It's of course based on the memoir Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis by J.D. Vance, which explored his childhood and family struggles as working class hillbillies that examined the white underclass, race and privilege in America. It's being written by Vanessa Taylor, who co-wrote Shape of Water and also worked on Game of Thrones. So the question now is whether this film can be a good Netflix original film. So is this film going to be any good? It wasn't. Aquaman 2. is moving forward, according to Toby Emmerich, Warner Bros. Chairman, saying that with the box office, they had enough confidence to begin talks on a sequel. So the question now is whether James Wan is going to return. This is a very similar situation that Patty Jenkins found herself in with Wonder Woman, in that she had to renegotiate for a sequel, despite the massive success of the first one. So James Wan will no doubt get a bigger payday. With that, they also announced 6 new Harley Quinn movies, 2 Joker spin-offs, and a Superman sequel. Guess which one of those is the least likely to happen? Big thing this week was the Oscar nominations. Hopefully, I think this segment is we're still able to do this segment. The time's going to come where it might run out of steam, but here it is for this week. Is Kevin Hart hosting the Oscars? So we have our Oscar nominations. First off, we have Best Picture. 8 films nominated for Best Picture. There's a possibility of up to 10 being nominated, but we have 8 this year. Black Panther was nominated. Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favourite, Green Book, Roma, A Star is Born, and Vice. So those are your Best Picture nominees. Just tell you, in a few weeks we are going to review all the Best Picture nominees, and also a few alternates to that. Maybe ones that got snubbed, just to see if we can get a better answer to which is the most worthy of a win. We also have Best Director. 5 directors nominated this time. Spike Lee for Black Klansman, Pavel Pavlovsky for Cold War, Yorgos Lanthimos for The Favourite, Alfonso Cuarón for Roma, and Adam McKay for Vice. A few things we should note, first of all, is that The Favourite and Roma lead the most nominations this year, and you can definitely see that as we go through these. It's also Spike Lee's first nod as a director, as Best Director, which is crazy when you think about it. He's been very apprehensive, and the awards, especially because he got snubbed for Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing, and I believe they actually gave him an award in 2015, which it was one of those awards that the Academy gives out for, we probably should have given you this award sooner kind of thing. So yeah, that's Spike Lee's first nomination for Best Director. Black Panther is the first superhero film to be nominated for Best Picture, of course. It also should be noted actually that Hannah Beachler, the film's production designer, is the first African American to be nominated for production design. She also worked on Beyonce's Lemonade, I think. So yeah, that's also quite a good thing. If we move on to the acting categories, we have Best Actor, Christian Bale as Dick Cheney. He was fantastic in Vice, so not a surprise there. Bradley Cooper for A Star is Born, playing Jack Maine. Willem Dafoe at Eternity's Gate as Vincent van Gogh. Rami Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody. Viggo Mortensen for Green Book. Best Actresses, we had a name I'm absolutely going to make a hames up here. Yalitza Aparicio for Roma. She played Cleo, the lead. Glenn Close and The Wife, who of course caused that upset at the Golden Globes when she beat Lady Gaga. How dare she? Glenn Close, goddamn. Olivia Colman for The Favourite, who played Queen Anne. Lady Gaga from A Star is Born, who played Ali. And Melissa McCarthy for Can You Ever Forgive Me? So, a few things we should probably talk about as well. We're talking about directing. No women nominated in the Best Director category, which of course upset quite a lot of people. There is some great films directed by women this year. There was Mary Queen of Scots that got a lot of buzz. Leave No Trace also. Lynn Ramsey's new film, I Was Never Really Here, I think isn't that what it's called? Joaquin Phoenix. I keep messing up the name of that because of that other one Joaquin Phoenix did where he was filmed by Casey Affleck, whatever it was called. I'm Not There, I'm Not Here, I'm Still Here? I don't know. Anyway, Lynn Ramsey's new film. Lynn Ramsey didn't get nominated. Although I did also read, I think it was at the end of the year, that there was less studio films held by women than in the 5 years up to it, so you have to question whether Hollywood is changing that in that sense of the word, or is it just the illusion to change. But hey, progress doesn't happen overnight, so hopefully they're building towards it. As far as Best Picture snubs, first of all, I need to fess up. I said that Bohemian Rhapsody probably won't get nominated, maybe Vice won't get nominated. How wrong I was on both counts. I also said Green Book mightn't get a chance, so yeah, I'm gonna eat I had to eat my words a little bit here. I seem to eat more words than I speak at this point. But possible Best Picture snubs, we have Can You Ever Forgive Me? Didn't get nominated as Best Picture. Did get a nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Actress, I think. Burning, which didn't actually even get nominated for a foreign language film, which is a bit of an upset because I've heard nothing but acclaim for that. If Beatrice Could Talk, shut out, it quite surprising considering how acclaimed Barry Jenkins was in his previous films. So, First Reformed, we got a nomination for, I think, Best Screenplay. Not very surprising because I think it might have been a case where it was released at the wrong time as well. Widows, Steve McQueen's new film, and considering how much of an Oscar darling he was, didn't even get any look in really. Eighth Grade, Leave No Trace, First Man, all ones that could have been very possibly in a Best Picture running that weren't. Although I thought First Man was a bit mixed. I don't think it was deserving of it personally. And Won't You Be My Neighbor was kicked out of the documentary category, which a lot of people are upset at because it was a great documentary. Then we have a few stumps for acting as well. Ethan Hawke, of course, for First Reformed, didn't get a look in. Bradley Cooper didn't get nominated as a director. And you might say, well, why is that significant? Well, for one, you have 8 Best Picture nominees, you have 5 Best Director nominations. Only 2 films ever have won Best Picture and not won, or not been nominated, I should say, for Best Director. And that is Driving Miss Daisy and Argo a few years ago. Doesn't look good for A Star Is Born to win Best Picture. I don't think that's an absolute surprise anyway, but it's quite strange that a film that got so much love didn't even get a Best Director nomination. He got an acting nomination, so it's not the worst. John David Washington for Black Klansman, some people are saying is overlooked in the acting category. That's a very competitive category this year, I think. But yeah, maybe he could have. I was quite surprised Willem Dafoe was there, actually, because that was a film that no one really saw, so it might just be a case of Willem Dafoe, that's his rap name, sorry. Willem Dafoe playing Vincent van Gogh. Oh, that was like a rhyme word there. Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe playing Vincent van Gogh at Eternity's Gate. Oh, why should I wait for my Oscar, please? Okay, back on track. We're back. Okay, not a lot of people saw that film, so it's quite a surprise that it got to where it was. And it might just be a case where they wanted to give Willem Dafoe a nomination. I don't think he's ever won an Oscar despite being nominated quite a few times. So, again, very competitive category this year. And Toni Collette, Hereditary, a lot of people wanted her to be nominated. Unfortunately, regardless of the performance, I just don't think it has a chance because it's a horror film. The Academy is very harsh on horror films, which is a bit of a shame considering we're at a bit of a renaissance with horror. If we carry on a few more nominations, we'll have a look at a few more. Best Supporting Actor, we had Mahershala Ali for Green Book. Adam Driver for Black Klansman, he was fantastic in that, to be fair. Sam Elliott, A Star Is Born, also another great performance. Richard E. Grant for Can You Ever Forgive Me? And Sam Rockwell for Vice, which I'm kind of surprised at, because he wasn't in it too much. It was a fine performance, but I'm surprised. Best Supporting Actress, Amy Adams in Vice. Again, a bit surprising. I think Vice is getting a lot more awards than maybe it deserves, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks. Marina de Tavira, this was a surprise. She plays the mother character in Roma, Sophia. Regina King, If Beatrice Could Talk, one of the few nominations for If Beatrice Could Talk. Emma Stone for The Favourite, and Rachel Weisz also for The Favourite. So all the 3 leads from The Favourite were nominated. Emma Stone, Olivia Colman, and Rachel Weisz. So that's good. Best Original Screenplay, we had The Favourite, First Reformed, Green Book, Roma, and Vice. Paul Schrader at least got a nomination for Best Original Screenplay, which a lot of people have said is long overdue. He never got any awards, I don't think, for Raging Bull or Taxi Driver when he was working with Scorsese. So, but it's really only in recent years that Scorsese is starting to get a bit more love from the Academy, I think. Best Adapted Screenplay, we had The Ballad of Buster Scruggs on Netflix, Joel Coen and Ethan Coen's new movie. Black Klansman, Spike Lee, of course, adapting a book by Ron Stallworth. Can You Ever Forgive Me? And, of course, If Beatrice Could Talk, again, another adapted screenplay. And A Star Is Born, which, it's funny, when you look at what I'm looking at here, it tells you, of course, the full nomination, where it was adapted from. So, someone was just like, oh, based on the book, or, with Ballad of Buster Scruggs one is a bit confusing. It's based on the short stories by this person, this person, this person. Black Klansman, of course, based on a book. Can You Ever Forgive Me, based on a book. If Beatrice Could Talk, based on a book. A Star Is Born, screenplay by Eric Roth and Bradley Cooper. This one gets confusing. And Will Felter is based on the 1954 screenplay by Moss Hart and the 1976 screenplay by Joan Didion, John Gregory Dunn, and Francis, based on a story by Robert Carson and Willem A. Wellman. So yeah, they've adapted that movie a lot. It's not too surprising, but it got nominated. So, last 2 ones I want to mention: Best Animated Feature Film and Best Foreign Language Film. So, Best Animated Feature Film, we have Incredibles 2, Isle of Dogs, Mirai, which is Japanese, I believe, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, of course, everyone's rallying Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse for that one. I think definitely deserves it. It's a fantastic movie. The animation was gorgeous. Granted, I haven't seen Mirai or Isle of Dogs. So, Best Foreign Language Film, we have Capernaum from Lebanon, which is in Arabic, directed by Nadine Labaki. Cold War from Poland, in Polish and French, directed by Paweł Pawlikowski. A lot of people were surprised that he was nominated for Best Director. I know the Academy loved Ida, which came out a few years ago that he did, so that could be a factor as well. Never Look Away from Germany, of course, in German, directed by Florian Henkel von Donnerschmack. I don't know why I'm reading these names. This must be disrespectful how much I'm butchering these names. But Roma from Mexico in Spanish and Mixtec, directed by Alfonso Cuarón. And Shoplifters from Japan, which is, I think, could have a really good chance if it weren't for Roma. Directed by Hirokazu Koreeda. And yeah, Burning is one that a lot of people say should be in there. So yeah, it's a competitive category. But I think if Roma is in a category, it'll probably win it since it has the Best Picture nomination as well. But yeah, that's rather unfortunate. So those are Oscar nominations, and Oscars are about 3 weeks away, a bit over 3 weeks away. And as I said, in a few weeks we're going to look at all the Best Picture nominees, look at a few of the snubs, see which ones are worthy, see which ones probably shouldn't be there. And I think there was quite a few this year, so should be interesting. And before we do anything else, we're going to look at trailer trash. So we had 2 trailers this week that I want to talk. Actually, one is the trailer, the other is just TV spots, so it won't take long. So there's actually really only 2 trailers of note this week. In fact, one of them is actually from last week, but I decided not to discuss it, and I'll explain why in a sec. So we have a trailer for the Ted Bundy biopic, starring Zac Efron, called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile. It just has Zac Efron, Lily Collins, a few other people in the cast as well. Jim Parsons is in it, John Malkovich is in it. This is an awful trailer in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. For one, it plays very glib and very cute with Ted Bundy, and that's okay, but it kind of sends out the wrong vibe, for one, especially when you're tackling a Ted Bundy biopic. But I suppose it's also a good way because we've seen all these grungy, overly violent murder biopics before, so it's nice that it's at least a bit different. It just seems like tonally it's a bit insensitive, considering the crimes of Ted Bundy, which, I mean, I don't need to remind you, are pretty vile. What's somewhat interesting about actually, well, is, of course, I haven't mentioned, but Sundance is going on this week. So I might talk a bit about that more next week when basically all the films have been shown, and see if there's any highlights and lowlights. But the film is actually already premiered at Sundance, as of this recording. It's getting a bit of a mixed reaction overall. Not apparently that interesting. Zac Efron is getting a lot of love. They're saying he's a great performance in this. It's a great performance by him. I thought this at the time, with regards to the trailer, was that it was from his wife's perspective and kind of playing up that whole thing, because his wife is a big part of this. So Ted Bundy had a wife while he was doing all these horrible crimes. So it's kind of that contrast between the man accused of all these horrible crimes and the family man, and how he could have that kind of duality. And that's apparently what the movie is like. It's kind of a question of how much can we love someone who is such a monster, and when do we accept how horrible they are and their effect on the family and loved ones and that kind of thing. I don't think the trailer got that across very well. The trailer, it almost looked like a rom-com with Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy. It's incredibly odd. They made him, and of course Ted Bundy is famously quite charming, at least on court and TV, but it's a very odd trailer in that way. They make it look kind of like, oh shucks, here goes Ted Bundy. Here he goes running around the corner. Woo! It's like they make a real celebrity out of him. So it's a bit of a... I've heard it isn't as bad in the film, but the trailer definitely gives out that wrong vibe. The kind of glamorizing of a serial killer, which apparently the movie does, but the trailer definitely gave that vibe. Now, I found it interesting as well, and that this movie came out the day after the Ted Bundy tapes dropped on Netflix. I found that quite odd, but as it turns out, it's the same person involved in both things. Joe Berlinger, so he generally makes a lot of documentaries. He made that Paradise Lost one, I think, as a producer, maybe. And he made the whole trilogy of those. I think he made Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. He does a lot of true crime work, but yeah, it seems like there's just this one guy that's just profiteering off Ted Bundy this year. He's got 2 projects from Ted Bundy. Trailer for a movie that is only okay, but apparently Zac Efron is very good in it. So if you want to check it out, I did not like the trailer personally. Different strokes for different folks. Maybe some people will really dig it. And the other one I was going to talk about, I didn't talk about it last week, and I'll explain why. So, TV spot for Shazam. Now, I didn't talk about this last week because there was a rumour that a trailer was coming out this week. In fact, there was a lot of scuttlebutt on Twitter. The person who reported it, getting in confrontation with the director to a certain degree, that kind of thing. But it seems like to me that there was going to be a trailer this week at one point, because there was set reports out, and normally when that happens, we are getting a trailer that week. Who knows? But what we are left with was a TV spot. So 53 seconds long. Type in extended TV spot if you want to have a look at it, and it gives us a good look at the film, especially at the effects, because of course the Comic-Con trailer was early on. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this movie. This movie looks very charming. You have, of course, Billy Batson, who basically becomes Shazam. He becomes a superhero, not unlike Superman. You see shots of him filming and not filming, flying, and it looks quite nice. And it also has a certain distinct visual look, which I quite like. It's like that very over topness of the suit and the superpowers, and then a very mundane kind of sense of reality, which I like, and I think suits the tone of that character. Yeah, it's a short trailer, so you check it out, and it parodies some elements of superhero, like they go into a realtor and try to buy a lair for the superhero. So of course we see him fighting Mark Strong with lightning and that kind of thing. So this is a good trailer. It's very interesting, and we have to start getting a trailer soon, surely, because the release date on this movie is coming up. But it looks very positive, and I think when you talk about superhero films, and considering we are at such a moment with superhero cinema right now, and we'll talk more about that with Glass in a sec, I think having a movie like this that sort of parodies it and is a bit self-aware works well. Not to as much a degree as Deadpool, but in that vein where it's aware of the tropes and can mock them. I think that's a good sign, and this movie definitely looks like it's got a lot of heart and a lot of charm, so very excited to see this. With that, we look at the box office for this week. Sort of stubbornly refused to change this week. Up top again, we have Glass. Had a 52% drop, which isn't too bad. 19 million. The Upside, again, second, showing great legs, really. I mean, it's only dropped 18% to come at 12 million. Aquaman still hanging in there, top 3, 7 million. Just ahead of a new release, The Kid Who Would Be King, which made 7.25 million, which is not that good. So I have to see it recover. Its cinema score was fine, but probably at the low end for a kids film, so that might affect it. Spider-Man to the Spider-Verse, which is very close. I think it's like 750,000 up behind being Sony Animation's largest hit ever, so good for that. And of course, with the Oscars having nominations being released, we have a lot of ones. Oscar runners have jumped up a few places. The favourite was 18th last week. It's jumped up to 13th. It says Green Book went from 14th place to 16th, which is massive. Bohemian Rhapsody saw better money. Didn't jump any places, but did make a bit more money. You'll see a bit of boost coming into Oscar season with some of these films as they start to get produced. I should also just change something I said last week. As I was saying, Funimation had not put out their official numbers for Dragon Ball yet. So, Dragon Ball was a huge success last week, but it did not come third, which I said originally. And actually it came in fourth, just behind Aquaman. But it was still a huge success. I didn't think the numbers were right when I was reading them, just because it was an insane amount, but it still did incredibly well. Dropped quite significantly this week. It actually dropped to 10th. Something like that is niche. It made a lot of money at the time, and it's still doing quite well, hanging in there. So I also want to talk about another new release that came out this week. Came in 8th place, Serenity. And the reason I want to talk about it is I mentioned it last week when we were doing the weekly watch, and I actually cut out what I said about it because I fumbled my words a bit. That's alright. If you can imagine that what you're listening to now is the better version, the cleaner version. What I basically said was that we hadn't had any reviews for it. That probably indicated a bad movie. And yeah, apparently it's not a good movie for one. But I'm going to talk about the ending, which is what I heard. I have no interest in seeing this movie, but I heard about the twist ending and it's hilariously weird. I just have to talk about it. So, spoilers for Serenity. I don't imagine you're going to see it. You probably shouldn't by all accounts. As I said, it's a film about Matthew McConaughey, who is a fisherman, and his ex-wife approaches him to kill her abusive husband. Let me try and make as much sense of this as I can, because this is a mind-boggling ending, and it's really strange that this is written by the guy who wrote Peaky Blinders and Hummingbird and Locke, because they're generally straightforward enough. And apparently about 2/3 of the way through the film, there's this character that's been trying to chase after Matthew McConaughey for the whole film, and he finally catches up to him and says something along the lines of, oh well, actually that's another thing I should explain. So Matthew McConaughey's fisher character has been trying to catch this giant tuna named Justice for like the whole movie. And this guy that's been chasing him says that if you catch Justice, I'll give you a free fish tracker or whatever, something along those lines. Eventually, when he catches up to him, he explains that he's the rules. So you're like, oh, the rules of what? So, as it turns out, he means the rules of a video game. Because throughout the course of this whole film, you're apparently seeing the son of Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway's character playing video games in his room. And the way it's played throughout the film, you kind of think it's in the present day and that he's doing this as a sort of escape from his stepfather assaulting his mother. But as it turns out, seriously, if you think this is weird so far, this is where it gets weird. So, turns out that Matthew McConaughey's character that we've been following for the whole film isn't real. he's a character in this video game, in a fishing video game that the son has modified or tampered with to make it sort of a revenge, violent scenario. So he's putting in cheat codes and that kind of thing, apparently. He's basically turning this mundane, boring fishing game into a kind of a murderous revenge kind of game. And I'll read what I have here from Slash Film, who wrote up a lot of places. Actually, we didn't write the twist because they apparently signed an embargo, but apparently Slash Film didn't. So they said Baker, which is as if this movie couldn't get much worse. His name is Dill Baker. Oh no, sorry, Baker Dill. Yeah, because it would be silly the other way around. Baker Dill is the name of Matthew McConaughey's character. So he said, Baker Dill is not a real person, but a character in a fishing game that his son has been tampering with to play out his fantasies of killing a digital version of his abusive stepfather. Baker is based on his father, who had died in the Iraq War, but Baker retains all those memories of his son and his time in the war, and for some reason can hear his son as Patrick inputs the code that changed a mundane fishing game into a murder scenario. Naturally, Baker undergoes a crisis of identity and free will, but decides to obey his son anyway and go through with killing the abusive husband, despite the game's various NPCs, which are non-player characters, trying to thwart him, including at one point his first mate, Duke, played by Digimon Hinsu, hiring a group of gangsters to break the husband's hands so he can't fish. No one dies in this game, Reed tells Baker. The way this ends is that what you're seeing from those clips, it wasn't a flashback. It turned out that it was all one big moment at the end of the film where the son decides that he's going to do something about it. So he's playing this game as his mother is being abused next door, basically. And it ends with him getting up and picking up a knife and going into the room next door where he's presumably going to kill his abusive stepfather. Which is like, what the hell? Where do you come up with that ending? It's crazy. Like, do you see the cast of this movie? It's crazy to think that they might have read the script and been like, yeah, this sounds great. It sounds like a rejected Black Mirror script. Absolute nonsense. I have no interest in seeing this movie, but I wouldn't mind seeing that ending. At least how they do that, because it sounds like absolute nonsense in this case. But yeah, if you saw Serenity, let me know what you thought of it. It sounds bonkers. Gotta be one of the weirdest endings I can think of in recent memory. But didn't do it any help at the box office. Whenever it only made 4.8 million this weekend, and it had a D-, I think, cinema score, which is one of the lowest ones in a long time. And before we move on to our feature, we'll have a look at the weekly watch. So this week, in some of the international territories, we're getting How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. So we'll look out for that. It's not out in America yet, but it will be out in international territories. Coming up on Netflix over next while, we have Velvet Buzzsaw coming out on the 1st of February. And we also have Russian Doll, which is a TV series that is being produced by Amy Poehler and Natasha Lyonne, which I've heard is fantastic. And if you listen to the plot, it sounds very odd, but it's Nadia, Natasha Lyonne's character, goes to a party as the guest of honor only to die, but she awakens the next day only to do it all over again in this comedy. Apparently it's cerebral, quite weird. It's 8 episodes, something of a dramedy. It seems to be a quite smart, quite clever, and quite funny show. I don't know how much of a lifeline you can give a show of that with that concept. Apparently the 8 episodes are good anyway, so that might be one to check out when it hits Netflix on the 1st of February. And also for you gamers out there, Kingdom Hearts 3 is coming out this Tuesday, January 29th. So that's what your weekly watch is. There's not much coming out this week, but there is some noteworthy stuff there. Definitely worth checking out. So without any further ado, we're going to look at M. Night Shyamalan's Eastrail 177 trilogy, or the Unbreakable trilogy, whatever you want to call it. Unbreakable, Split, and of course Glass. There's not going to be spoilers for Glass right off the bat, but I will highlight when there is spoilers so I can discuss it, because I need to talk about the ending a lot. So before we review Glass, I think it's important that we look at the films that preceded it. I think you need a bit of context. Look at the characters and see what world this film is set in. So the first film that came in the series was called Unbreakable, and came out in the year 2000. And something that needs to be pointed out is how different the superhero cinematic landscape was at that point. There'd been one X-Men film that summer. I think Blade had come out 2-3 years before that. So it really hadn't caught on yet the way it has now, or the way that would in the early 2000s. So the idea of a superhero film was still quite novel compared to now. That does a few things. For one, I think it hides some of the film's weaknesses. I think it made the film seem slightly better at the time. Not that it's a bad film, I still think it's quite a good movie. But I do think it hasn't aged particularly well in this era. And I think another problem is that to a modern audience is some of those conventions or tropes of a superhero film are a bit more apparent, and it reveals some of the film's secrets. So for one, I think the idea that Mr. Glass is the villain, I think is very obvious to a modern audience, because we're used to a hero having his antithesis be a villain. So the idea that this unbreakable man going against a breakable man just makes sense. I don't think that necessarily takes away from the film. I think a lot of M. Night Shyamalan's films can, unfortunately, once you know the twist, the film can be somewhat ruined. And I don't think this is one of them. I think it still has a lot of merit. Now, when he initially had this in his mind, it sounded like he wanted a 3-film series, with part 1 being the origin of the hero, part 2 being the origin of the villain, and part 3 being where the hero and the villain clash. And I guess we somehow got that now, even though I don't think it's how he originally intended it. But the problem is that the first film, I think, in this series, Unbreakable, is a bit too origin focused. Like, for one, if you look at the layout of most superhero films, your first act is the superhero getting his powers and learning of his powers. And then part 2 is him testing the limits of himself and kind of developing his own morality or sense of what it means to be a hero. And then part 3 is, of course, when the hero clashes with the villain. So, like, for example, look at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man film, which I think it became sort of, not saying it's a perfect film, of course not, but it's a sort of a benchmark for a lot of superhero films that would follow, where you have superhero gets his powers, learns of his powers. Part 2, he develops his philosophy, which is, of course, with great power, great responsibility. Tests his powers a bit, tries to balance being a real person versus being a superhero. Villains start to rise, they come into conflict, and by the third act, they of course clash, and yada yada yada. So I think with Unbreakable, and maybe it's a case where that structure hadn't been fully laid out, so I think it focuses too much on the origin story. Once our character learns he has powers, which I want to discuss that a bit more in a minute. Our second act, he's kind of in denial. He's not entirely sure what to make of it. He kind of denies his responsibility. And then he barely even actually becomes a hero. It's only really in the last 20 minutes where he kind of embraces it. For me, that makes especially the middle quite slow. And now what I wanted to say when it says he's not really aware of his power, one of the powers he does have, aside from being unbreakable, is that this kind of cognition that he can see memories or something someone, like for example, he hits off someone and realizes that they have a gun on them, or that someone's being held hostage, that kind of thing. I don't know how he wouldn't realize he did have powers when he could do something like that, but anyway, it is a good film. As I said, I don't think it's aged particularly well, but I don't think it's an awful film. I still think it's quite good. I think it's fallen a bit in my estimation. It's strange actually, in watching these films again. Unbreakable fell, in my opinion, and Split actually went up. But I think Unbreakable is still probably the better of the two. It's a little bit too long. It's about 2 hours. I think it's still a bit long. I think especially the middle needs to be gone out. There's not much else to say about it. It's grounded. I think it works for the most part. Now, again, when this film came out, a lot of the things it does weren't really being done. There wasn't as many superhero films. There weren't as many, dissection of what it meant to be a hero and that kind of thing. Now it's far more frequent. So I think with a modern audience, that might hurt it somewhat. Years later, 2016. Actually, no, it was 2017. I think 2016 was when it maybe played festivals. We had Split. Split is sort of, I guess, a backdoor sequel, if you want to call it that. Because no one was really aware at the time that this was a sequel to Unbreakable. So, an important point to note, for one, because this really does feel like two films that were made almost in isolation. I think you can hide that initially, but I think especially when you watch Glass, I think that's an issue. So, Split is the story of James McAvoy's character, whose real name I think is Kevin Wendell Crumb, I believe. And he's got 23 personas in his head, and each of them change his mannerisms, indeed his physicality in the case of the probably the most notable one, which is the Beast, which is an amalgamation of animals of the Philadelphia Zoo, which is where Kevin is kind of living nearby and works it. One thing I would say, I think the film has a great sense of reality. It's a lot darker than the world we have in Unbreakable, but that does make sense because, of course, this is a villain. I think it also deserves a lot of credit for how well filmed it is, and that sounds odd because it's like visually they keep it interesting, and you're in the same setting for so much of this film that I think with the camera angles, it doesn't ever feel like you run out of places to look at in such a confined setting. That really works, and it keeps the place somewhat interesting. I also think we don't necessarily get a sense of geography in the place, which is good because I think that's exactly what the characters in the film would feel like. They don't necessarily know where they are or what the layout of this place is, which works. Now, playing opposite to James McAvoy is Anya Taylor-Joy, who gives an amazing performance. I think this is the first film I saw her in, and she's very, very good. She has very good chemistry with James McAvoy as well. And she has her own demon. She has her own dark history of abuse. And we see a bit of her flashback throughout the film of her uncle being abusive. And we actually do find out that she has to live with her uncle now, which again comes up in Glass later on. So one thing I like, even though I'd seen this film before, it's still unpredictable to a certain degree because James McAvoy's character changes so much, and the character has so many different personas that it's hard to remember things beat by beat. So having the character be so unpredictable and the personas essentially kind of come out of nowhere, like sometimes they just change very, very quickly. I think it helps us feel how the girls that were abducted in this film feel, because we don't really know what's going to come next or what he's going to do. It works incredibly well. I do think towards the middle of the film, it drags. I'm not sure how I might write his movies, but it really feels like he has the first act, the last act, and then he just pads out the middle or kind of spins wheels a bit. And I think that can be an issue in this film and also in Unbreakable. There's also the character of the therapist, who I find incredibly irritating in this movie. A lot of dialogue M. Night writes, sometimes it just doesn't sound natural. It sounds like something someone would write, but you can't really say it. And with the therapist, it's just a character there for exposition. And it can be quite grating at times. But again, it's somewhat necessary exposition, but I don't think it's entirely necessary, because there are scenes later on that tell us all we need to know about the character of Kevin. The lighting of the movie is quite good. And I know that might seem like a minor point, but it's dark. It also is quite creepy and unsettling. Like, it has a sense of being natural and unnatural at the same time. Like, the scenes are well lit. It's got a sort of a yellowish tinge throughout it, which really works for the movie. It gives it a kind of grimy feel, which this, of course, needs. It's quite refreshing, especially because I think the lighting and the cinematography in some of his other films isn't fantastic. So I think it's a bit of a step up here. The character of the Beast is very well done, without it seeming completely unrealistic. It feels like it could be an actual possibility, which is important because this is, of course, in a realistic universe. And it does feel it's a lot more horror-centric than Unbreakable, which is not too surprising. But it should be noted that I think Unbreakable is more of a thriller, maybe a superhero thriller, if there is such a thing. And this is sort of a psychological horror film. Now, it is somewhat supernatural, I think, with the use of the Beast, having him be the amalgamation of all these characters. It's not entirely, it's grounded in reality. I think that's one of the benefits, of course, of having therapists, as annoying as it can be. It does bring it back down to reality, which is, of course, important for this movie. I also like how quickly the origin story is handled here. We only see flashes of his childhood, and that really distressing moment where we see him under the bed and we see his mother shouting, Kevin Wendell Crumb, get out here. And we see bits of that kind of recurring throughout the movie. He mentions a crumb that's on Anya Taylor-Joy's character Casey's jacket, and he freaks out. So maybe it's because Crumb is his surname, and later on he uses a hanger, just like the hanger she's threatening him with. So I like that. It makes the screenplay a bit smarter. It kind of reverberates throughout the movie. Like he can never escape his demons. I think it works. Casey, as I said, I think is a very good character. Anya Taylor-Joy's character, and that she has her scares, like not just physically but mentally because of the abuse. She's quite strong because of it. There might be a sort of a mixed message in that she's basically saved because of the fact she was abused. And it's sort of like a strange thing of like, woohoo, abuse saved her, abuse saved the day. And I don't think it should be viewed as that. I think it's more of a case of that she's suffered enough and it'll make her a stronger person. And in this case, it spares her life. So I think it's maybe a bit clumsily handled, but I assume that's what it's going for. I do think the ending is very flat. And of course, since it was intended to have a sequel, I think it's a bit more excusable. I think the ending of both these films is actually a little bit flat. But like the ending of Unbreakable, we finally find out he's a villain, and then it just like Bruce Willis just walks away and we get a text scroll telling us how the film ends. Which is like, what's that film that the Red Letter Media guys reviewed? Was it Blood Debts? Where as soon as he blows up the villain, it just says he spent his life in prison for killing whoever. It's basically like that. It just says Mr. Glass spent his life in a mental asylum, whatever. It's a bit underwhelming. It's like all this build up and then it just goes, hey, there's your twist. That's it. And with this one, I will say this about the ending. As much as I think it's a bit of an anticlimax, having the kind of chase scene, it's very tense and it's well shot. It's very clear what's going on, and that's something that's often not done well in chase films, and especially in something with such a confined setting. I think it works well. It kind of we see her being spared, and it just sort of stops with the almost promise of Kevin Wendell Crumb will return kind of thing, which is of course I think a bit of a letdown. But of course the scene that everyone talks about is played during the credits. Actually, it played very clumsily. Actually, watching back in it, where this character's basically watching the TV. They're talking about the Horde, which is I guess his supervillain name, Kevin's supervillain name, and he has all these characters hoarding inside him. And it's on the news, and this woman says, hey, this is just like that guy. What was his name? He blew up a train like 20 years ago. Does anyone remember his name? And of course, Bruce Willis is right next to her and says, Mr. Glass. And that's it. That's how it's set up. A little bit clumsily, but at the same time, it's impressive that was kept a secret. And it's very cool because it's obviously never thought that we would see a sequel to Unbreakable 20 years later. One thing I will say is that the film does kind of keep up that dark tone. We find that even though Anya Taylor-Joy is basically free, she has to go back to her uncle, who would of course abuse her. And I always thought it implied, and I think it's more or less confirmed in Glass, that as bad as this experience has been, as horrible as it has been, that in overcoming it and defeating it, she's basically guaranteeing that she can now more or less deal with anything, and that when she does eventually get home, she's going to resolve the situation with her uncle. So those are the two films we have leading up to Glass. We have Unbreakable, which introduced David Dunn and Mr. Glass. Split, which introduced Kevin Wendell Crumb, or the Horde. And all we know now is that they're set in the one universe. And it's a more grounded, realistic universe, I think. I'm trying to think, is there one that's more realistic than the other? I think maybe it's Unbreakable. I think that Split only comes across as unrealistic because of how horrific it is, and and it almost seems supernatural. But I do think that they're still both quite grounded, so it's not a major issue. The universe do seem slightly different, but I don't know if you would call it majorly a problem. And we look at Glass, and that's what we'll do now. So we'll start with non-spoilers. We'll give a general review, and then we'll talk about spoilers, because the ending and the last act is what I want to talk about. More than anything, I think that's the part where my interest and affection for this movie completely fell apart. Okay, so non-spoilers first. I want to start with some positive stuff, because trust me, there's going to be a whole lot of negative coming up. I think it's a gorgeous looking movie, for one. And I don't necessarily mean the lighting or the cinematography. I just mean looks great. The production design and the colour especially. There's one scene in particular I want to highlight, which I think might be my favourite scene in the whole movie, which is when they're all in the pink room with Sarah Paulson's therapist character. And it actually looks like a shot out of a Wes Anderson film. It's just beautifully composed, almost symmetrical, and there's a lot of colour going on. It's a pink room. You have green for David Dunn, purple for Mr. Glass, and yellow for Kevin, and it's just looks great. I think in general, overall, the colour palette of the movie is quite nice to look at, and I think the lighting is a bit more subtle in this one, but it's certainly not a disaster. It's probably a step down from Split as far as visually, but I do think it still looks pretty decent. I think the performances, for the most part, are fine, with a few exceptions. I think James McAvoy gives a great performance again. I do feel like they could have reeled him in a little bit for this one. As far as the personas, a few of them, it felt like there was one scene especially where he was just showing them off, and they're not all, as airtight as say his Dennis impression or his Patricia impression, for example. I think it's a great performance piece for him. They just let him go wild with this, and overall, I think it was very successful. I think he gives a performance on par, or maybe even surpasses his performance in Split, which was a great performance. I think on another note, Samuel L. Jackson proved that he can deliver when it comes to acting. He plays the character slightly differently to the way he played it on Unbreakable. We have more, I suppose, dead, a more serene kind of Mr. Glass for at least a part of the movie, but he delivers on both fronts, and it's great seeing, because of course Samuel L. Jackson does a lot of paycheck movies, it seems like, or he phones it in, but for this at least it's a great performance. It's more than he usually does, and that's not saying that he doesn't normally give a great performance. It's just more that he has more to work with. It's a more complex character, I think. Now on the other hand, I think there was a few people that were wasted. Sarah Paulson, for example, as a therapist. The therapist didn't really have much to do. It was just a very kind of one-note performance, and she's a great actress, so I think they might have wasted her in that role. I think on the other hand, same could be said for Anya Taylor-Joy, who I think deserves way better roles, to be honest. This is maybe the fourth film I've seen her in. So I saw her in this, Split, Thoroughbreds, and The Witch, and she's fantastic in all of them. I think she definitely has not just a bright future, but I think she should be getting better roles, because there's not much reason for her to be in this film except to connect Split, and except for the ending. I think that can be said for a lot of the side characters. Each of the leads has a kind of another character. So we have David Dunn has his son, Mr. Glass has his mother, and Kevin has Casey. Fine in that regard. Performance wise, technically, it looks fine. It is pretty good. Now, I will admit I was ready to eat my words with this film, because I kind of dissed it a bit in the podcast. I said I heard it was bad. I was so ready to eat my words until we got to the last act, which I think was an absolute disaster. I feel like it was cluttered. I feel like it didn't deliver. I felt like it was a nonsensical twist, for one. I don't know, this feels like he came up with this early on and he just couldn't come up with something better. I just think it's really lazy and uninteresting. That's kind of the non-spoiler stuff. I will say the analogy I have for this film, I can go on all day about talking about this movie, but the best analogy I could come up with is that episode of The Simpsons with Poochie. It's itchy and scratchy. In other words, Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis, those are itchy and scratchy. Those are the time-honored classics. They say, hey, let's introduce this character, because he seems like he'd be popular. So here's your Poochie or James McAvoy. And there's so much Poochie crammed in that itchy and scratchy get lost. And they never get to the fireworks factory. So there's not really a big payoff. And it's kind of a disappointment. Especially towards the end. There's not really any climax. There's no sense of closure. It just sort of says, alright, that's enough. Doesn't pay off. which is the worst thing you can say about a trilogy. Overall, this feels much more like a sequel to Split than a sequel to Unbreakable. I feel like Bruce Willis especially gets sidelined in this movie, and it's not necessarily that he doesn't really give a good performance in the movie anyway, but they don't give him a lot to do, which is a shame because for a film that's been marketed as it's been 20 years in the making, and to not have those characters have much to do, or at least have one of them not have much to do, it's a real disappointment. So this film definitely needs to be discussed with spoilers because the last act is obviously quite a big deal and a lot happens. Just to clear things up, nitpicking and that kind of thing, plot holes, minor plot holes, they're kind of present in every movie. You know, it goes back to, especially like with horror films, for example, the whole thing of why don't you just call the police, because obviously that's what you would do logically in a situation, but then you wouldn't have a movie. For me, I can take certain plot holes, I can take certain nitpicks, as long as it doesn't ruin my basically connection with the movie, as long as it doesn't ruin or shatter this universe. And I think the third act of this really did. Now, look, there were some minor things that bugged me, but that I completely overlooked at the start, like how he just happens to bump into the Horde, and that's how he knows. I thought it was quite funny, quite arbitrary how his son, who basically plays Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, Oracle, basically, and he says, okay, the 3 murders or the 3 abductions were in this little triangle, so I think he's over here. just pointing at a random place, which doesn't seem to have much logic or reason, but you go with it. I mean, it's pretty blistering as far as an indictment of the Philadelphia police that they couldn't find him when this guy could so easily, but it's things like that don't bother me. You think about it all the time, but you go, look, I've always kind of subscribed to the Pixar theory, which is coincidence to get you into a situation isn't bad, coincidence to get you out of a situation is. So this ending, let's just talk about it. So Mr. Glass and the Horde obviously team up in the movie, and David Dunn is meant to be this good guy. So the whole idea is that Mr. Glass is trying to prove to the world the existence of superheroes, and to do that, he wants to have the Horde fight. I think they call him the Overseer, which is of course David Dunn, Bruce Willis's character, fight at this biggest tower in Philadelphia or something. Now, when you hear that, you know it's very unlikely something like that is going to happen in this movie, because it just does not fit the tone of the film. Having a big fight on a skyscraper would seem like something you see in a typical superhero movie, but not in this. And what we're left with is a very awkward last act where they kind of just shuffle around and fight outside the mental asylum. And for one, having a fight between the Beast and Bruce Willis was really never very interesting, because their powers are quite similar, and you see it early on in the film, in the first act, and it's honestly quite funny how awkward it is. It's just kind of awkward shoving, and they throw a table back and forth for a minute, and that's kind of it. So it's not really an intriguing fight. So I was wondering what you can do to even add a bit of interest. What they do has been quite divisive, and I personally didn't enjoy it. I know a lot of people did. Personally, for me, I just found completely ruined my immersion in the movie, and it's quite stupid. So basically, what happens is, obviously they never get to the tower, so they're fighting outside the mental asylum, and these kind of SWAT officers or police officers come to the scene, and eventually what we find out is that we see kind of these tattoos on a few of their wrists, which has a clover, a shamrock, and we're thinking, oh, this must be some secret or dodgy organisation here, they're all in cahoots or whatever, and it's very awkwardly done. So what ends up happening, all the fighting and all that is kind of put to one side. We find out Sarah Paulson is a villain, which isn't that interesting, quite honestly. It's not entirely surprising, because the way she kind of says things and the way she doubts them at the start makes you think that maybe she could have that villainous side to her. She basically gives a kind of a villainous monologue without it being that evident how villainous she is, but the way she kind of panders to them and talks down to them, makes it sound like there is an ulterior motive there. So it wasn't entirely surprising, especially because she didn't have much of a character up to that point. As it turns out, this organisation is trying to suppress the existence of superheroes so humanity doesn't find out about them. Now, there's a lot in that, so let's try and unpack that first of all. Okay. Now, firstly, in this realistic superhero world, are these really the heroes? Is this organisation really worried about these superheroes being learned about? Right, so let's just go through our list of heroes that we know. We have Mr. Glass, who is a brittle man, who's apparently quite smart. Although we never really. One thing that slightly bugged me was we obviously know he's intelligent because he's able to manipulate people and that kind of thing. And I was really kind of thought it was strange when they just showed how easy he could get out of his room, and I was waiting for the explanation on that. But it was just nope. He's smart. He's apparently not smart enough to have any way of breaking out of the mental asylum in the last 20 years. I never got that. And I know some other people are saying, oh, well, he had to wait for the right person to be there. If he wanted the right person to be there, he could have just said, hey, this guy, David Dunn, he's superpowers. You're looking for them. He also thinks he's a superhero. Go get him. And then you'd have a strong person. You could try and manipulate him. But again, that's a nitpick. Nothing that concerns me too much. That's our first hero, a guy who's somewhat smart and incredibly breakable. And that's something I think is pretty important later on. You have Bruce Willis, who is pretty strong. Not even immensely strong, seemingly. Not superhumanly strong, but just relatively strong. Stronger than your average man, I guess. And he has some degree of cognition. Okay? Again, not majorly impressive. And then you have the Beast, who, yeah, is incredibly strong. Except it's not exactly easy to trigger it. So, are they really worried about this level of superhero in the world? Like, I think so much of this stuff, you can actually... Like, there's people in the world who can do things as amazing as this. Easily. There's people who have survived gunshots. There's people who are that strong that they have flipped cars. So, are they really trying to suppress that? And what I think the film does worse about is that they put the idea in your head that they could be crazy. I was kind of expecting, okay, that could be the twist, but thankfully that wasn't it, because it would have been obviously so obvious because they dangle it in front of you. But it just draws the audience out even more, because you're like, yeah, you know, these aren't that impressive. Which means that the ending is even less sensical. I don't know why you would suppress people of such low magnitude, which brings me to my next point. So, at the end of the film, we find out that basically Mr. Glass has been streaming this to the internet. And now this footage is out there, and the footage is so unimpressive. It's the Beast fighting people for a little bit. If he flips a van, Bruce Willis bends a metal pole. And that's kind of it. That's meant to... I suppose he does a kind of a jump, a kind of a weird run, like a kind of an animal, the Beast does. And that's meant to say, hey, that's right, everybody, superheroes are real. In this day, like, did Shyamalan write this in the 90s? Because does he not understand how the internet works? Like, if that clip went on the internet, first of all, no one will believe it. Do you know how much that CGI kind of advertising and nonsense stuff like that gets out there? Like alien, like UFOs and things like that. People are like, oh, you won't believe what this person did. And straight away the internet would just pick it apart and say, hey, this is fake. Probably CGI, whatever. Probably some viral marketing. Not to mention, in this realistic world, that stuff isn't that impressive. It's impressive, but it wouldn't make you go, my God, superheroes are real. Because, like, by this logic, some of the stuff they can do, you should be hunting down like the cast of Cirque du Soleil, who can do weird, flexible stuff that no one in the world can do, or go after people who compete in Ironman competitions. Like, it's about as impressive, to be quite honest with you. And it makes me wonder if Shyamalan realises how super heroic his characters are. Does he realise how underpowered they are for a film like this? I think the idea of a society, an organisation that suppresses superheroes is an interesting idea in a film where heroes are more powerful. Something like The Boys, but maybe with a bit more nuanced writing, I guess. There's another thing then, I don't know who are these people in this organisation. I don't know why it took them so long to become a part of the story. It's never really teased beforehand. And I saw some person say online, well, there's actually a comic where they talk about synchronization in the first Unbreakable. Yeah, but there's a lot of comics on Unbreakable. I think that could easily indicate any potential plot point or any potential direction they wanted to go. Like, in the last act, are all these people in it? Which seems odd. I mean, there's going to be a report into how 3 inmates or 3 mental patients got killed anyway. Like, how one of them got drowned in a puddle, no? And then it answers the question of why are they even waiting 3 days to convince them that they're not superheroes? Because whatever about the strength and all this, the fact that you have precognition and all that, like, they put in their mind that they couldn't be superheroes. But why are you doing that at all? And why are you waiting 20 years in the case of Mr. Glass to not do this? Why did you have to wait to get them all together? If this organisation has been around for a while, which we presume it is. Why did it even take them that long to find the overseer? They know his name, as they announce when they catch him. I mean, it's not that hard to catch an old, shuffling Bruce Willis character. He's the guy in the massive raincoat, regardless of the weather. It's like, and yes, look, this is nitpicking, but when you have an ending this week, I think once you pull one thread, it all falls apart. And that's what the problem with the ending is. There isn't really much to it. And look, people are saying that, it's meant to be a realistic, depressing reality and how superheroes can't be real and that kind of thing. And they say that there's superheroes out there already. They make it sound like there's 3 of them now. There could be others in other places. There could be more now that there's these 3 eliminated. And it's really just silly. Like, I don't know why you would suppress people that are so unimpressive, basically. I don't think that they're going to upend the status quo that much because they've been out there for the Overseer's case at least 20 years, making very little difference, not being liked particularly much by the public, seemingly. It's just nonsense. I don't get it. And then we have obviously the reason why the whole side characters are brought into it. So, as I said, the footage got recorded and they share it with the world. And they're all just sitting in a train station, I guess to give this thing some sort of rhyming structure and that, hey, remember he was in a train station in the first one? And we just see the reaction of everyone like, oh my god, this world has superheroes. Which again, I don't think the footage sells that very much at all. I think one of my major problems with this film is that it doesn't feel like an Unbreakable sequel. It really feels like it follows up Split a lot more. With the Unbreakable stuff crammed in, I think it really shows with Bruce Willis's character because he's not really in it that much. Like, by the time we get to the last act and it's like, hey, it's about to happen. We're going to get this big payoff. He gets drowned in a puddle, face down. Which I think is, look, I know he's weakened by water in Unbreakable. I think they really amped that up in this movie. He's completely hopeless. Like, the guy just drags him like one-handed and just drowns him in a puddle. And he doesn't even do a good job of drowning him. He's like bobbing his head up and down for like 10 minutes. So Sarah Paulson can grab onto his hand and give some vague idea of, hey, we're the bad guy. Look, maybe it is just a commentary of saying, hey, in this realistic world, we can't have actual heroes. I thought it was awful in that sense. And Mr. Glass just dies because, I mean, he was never going to be long for this world anyway. I'm surprised he got to the age he did, being as brutal as he is, because he, like, gets hurt, then falls over, and this... he's got a bad case of bone-itis kind of thing, you know? It's really... And the Beast, like, the only reason I can imagine Casey being in this is that she humanized the Beast, and when the Beast gets humanized, he gets shot. But not, like, shot in the head or shot dead. Shot enough so he can talk to her for a while before dying, which is something that Mr. Glass got and the Overseer didn't get, which is sort of a shame. And I guess it's, again, giving this bleak world outlook of the heroes get no redemption, they get no moment where they get closure, and the villains do, and sometimes life is unfair and all that kind of stuff. And then there was the fact that, like, it does... Stuff like this makes me wonder if this film was written a long time ago, or if it was a case where Shyamalan just was too stubborn to change the script a bit. Like the awful, heavy-handed dialogue by Mr. Glass's mother. Like, oh, this is a limited edition, and I've heard about this, and oh, this is the big old finale. It's like, you don't need to tell us this. Just saying, hey, this is like a comic book doesn't make it more comic booky. If you want your film to be grounded and somewhat removed from comic books, stop referencing comic books. It's so annoying. I literally roll my eyes at this movie when it does stuff like that. It's so embarrassing. What are you doing? We get it. You're alluding to comic books. It's not that surprising. It's a superhero film. And the guy collect comic book art in the first one. Just tone it down a bit. And look, it's, I don't know, this ending really just, it really ruined the whole film for me. And I can't even get across how frustrated I was. When I came out of the movie the first time I was seeing it, and this is probably nearly coming up on a week now, like, I wasn't angry, I was just like, how? How do you make a film that you wanted to apparently make for so long and then just end up with this? You just throw all your characters out at the end and say, hey, this whole organisation that you just learned about, we're going to bring them down. All these side characters that barely got a look in the film, they're going to take down this organisation who have vague motives, who all meet at some restaurant. And I guess they must wait until one person goes out to be like, hey, he's not in the organisation. Wait till he's finished his dinner. Then we can talk. And then it's the whole thing of, oh, they actually were supers. And we didn't want to kill them. We just wanted to tell them they weren't supers and lock them in a mental asylum forever. Just so stupid. It felt like the film needed a twist. Because that's what Shyamalan has to do. And it wasn't a well thought out twist. I honestly think, had the film not lent into that idea more, that they were crazy, that sort of twist wouldn't have completely annoyed me. But this whole secret organisation, who have no real have not really been foreshadowed or alluded to, and you just kill off the character because they're like, that's an ending. And then he basically gave us the ending to Watchmen. You know, Rorschach leaves his journal behind, and it's implied that, hey, that's going to be the future. And he did that with a vague internet site of people who aren't as impressive. It's just, I don't know. Look, maybe it was just shock. Maybe I was shocked that the film went this way, in a bad way. And maybe that disappointed me, and that affected my opinion of the film. But overall, I just thought that any goodwill the film had built up is completely gone in the last act. There's a lot about the film in general that annoyed me. Misuse of some of the characters. The lack of interaction between certain characters. But yeah, it all comes down to that ending. Like, it's kind of the whole deconstruction of a superhero, and when you do that, it should lead to some better knowledge of the genre or the characters, or should say something. It's not just deconstruction for the sake of subverting expectation. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Some people have loved this film. Some people didn't like it at all. It seems like it's a divisive film. Certainly the ending is proving divisive. Am I completely wrong? Let me know what you thought of the film. What you thought of Glass. Did you like the other films in the series? Do you think the ending was great? Is there something I'm missing? Maybe there is, because maybe I was just so gobsmacked that I missed some key bit of information that would have changed my whole perspective on it. I will say I was probably less into the ending a few days before recording this, but I kind of listened to a few more perspectives, looked up what a few people thought, and it softened me a little bit. If I recorded this the day of, I would have been just shouting and tearing into this film. So I'm a bit more balanced now. So that's what I thought of Glass. Overall, I would not recommend seeing it. Because if you are looking for a sequel to Unbreakable, you're going to be disappointed. If you're looking for a sequel to Split, you'll probably also be disappointed. Some of the best stuff in this is the stuff that follows up Split, in my opinion. But it's hard to recommend to anyone because it does feel like two films that were just mashed together, that don't fully go together. You know, I'll bring up that point again. It's itchy and scratchy, and they shove Poochie in there, and they never get to the fireworks factory. That's what this film felt like to me. Anyway, if you'd like to tell me how wrong I am, or how right I am even, you can hit me up on Twitter at pop_cult_pod. You can hit me on Instagram at popcultpod, all one word. Email me at popcultpod@gmail.com. Or shoot me a message on Facebook. We're now on Facebook if you don't mind being infiltrated by Russians or whatever goes on Facebook nowadays, because I barely use Facebook, but Pop Cult Compound. And aside from that, wherever you're listening to this, I hope you enjoyed it. If you can subscribe, leave a positive review, positive rating, that all helps. Just maybe some feedback, positive or negative. So you can check us out, whether it's on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Soundcloud, or YouTube. I put up last week's episode on YouTube, a bit more visual, including the trailers and some of the images we were talking about. So I might do that going forward, and I'm looking to start a bit more exclusive content for the YouTube channel. which of course I'll reference on the podcast when it does drop. And next week, what do we have? Well, we have the big game. All the Americans are excited about the big game. Sports team is playing sports team, and someone's going to be a big old winner and get their rings. But of course, from an entertainment perspective, that means we probably get some trailers. I haven't heard much of what we're getting. I think we're going to get a Hobbs and Shaw trailer. Probably something Marvel related, whether it be Captain Marvel or Avengers. Aside from that, I've heard not much. I think that the interest in the trailers at Super Bowl is a bit less than it used to be. There is a lot more news coming out though this week. I've heard a bit about Birds of Prey. Is going to have some stuff dropping this week, along with a few more things. And I might do a topic on movie licensed video games, where they've gone and why they died out a little bit. So yeah, there's lots to discuss next week. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you'll come back. There's a lot more to discuss next time you're here. So I will see you next Tuesday.